What if I told you that beneath a mask of shame lived a beauty so rare that it could bring an immortal to his knees? Tonight's story begins with a girl whose scars told a tale of survival and a vampire lord who saw past the surface to the soul beneath. She was hidden away, deemed too damaged for society's gaze. He was ancient, powerful, and utterly ruthless. But when their worlds collided in the most unexpected way, everything changed. This is a story of beauty found in brokenness, of love that transcends the physical, and of a connection that defied every law of their supernatural world. If you love stories of forbidden romance and supernatural redemption, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The mirror had been covered for so long that dust particles danced in the afternoon light where Sarah's reflection should have been. She traced her fingers along the cloth that concealed the glass, a daily ritual that had become as natural as breathing. In the small cottage on the outskirts of Millbrook, mirrors were forbidden, reflective surfaces banished, and Sarah lived in a world carefully constructed to hide her from her own image. The scars ran from her left temple down to her jaw, a twisted maze of silver lines that told the story of the fire that had claimed her family's manor 7 years ago. She had been 13 then, trapped in the burning library while flames devoured everything she had ever known. The beams that fell had marked her forever, not just with physical scars, but with a shame so deep it had become part of her identity. "Sarah, darling, your breakfast is ready," called Martha from the kitchen. The older woman had been her guardian since that terrible night, the only person who looked at Sarah without flinching, without that telltale pause that came when people first saw her face. Sarah adjusted the dark veil that covered the left side of her face and made her way downstairs. The cottage was small but warm, filled with herbs hanging from the rafters and the constant smell of Martha's medicinal teas. As the village healer, Martha had taken in the scarred girl out of duty, but over the years, genuine affection had grown between them. "The Henderson boy came by again this morning," Martha said, setting down a plate of eggs and toast. "He asked if you might consider helping with the harvest festival preparations." Sarah's hand instinctively moved to her veil. "You know I can't. People stare, Martha. They whisper about the cursed girl who survived when her family didn't. You're not cursed, child. You're blessed to be alive." But Sarah had heard the whispers in town, seen the way mothers pulled their children closer when she passed. The fire had been no accident. Everyone knew that. Dark magic had been involved, they said. Supernatural forces that had marked her as surely as the flames had scarred her skin. As evening fell, Sarah retreated to her favorite spot by the window overlooking the forest. She had always felt drawn to the darkness beyond the tree line, as if something there called to her in a language older than words. Tonight, that feeling was stronger than ever. The wind picked up, rattling the windows, and with it came the sound of hoofbeats on the cobblestone path leading to their cottage. Martha looked up from her knitting, concern creasing her weathered features. Visitors after dark were rare in their corner of the world, and never brought good news. A sharp knock echoed through the cottage. 3 precise raps that seemed to carry an authority that made the very air thick with tension. Martha rose slowly, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the door handle. Standing in the doorway was a man unlike any Sarah had ever seen. Tall and imposing, with raven black hair that fell just past his collar, and skin so pale it seemed to glow in the moonlight. He wore a long coat of midnight blue, and his eyes were the color of winter storms, gray and silver and utterly mesmerizing. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and cultured, with an accent Sarah couldn't place. "I'm looking for someone, a young woman who survived the Ashwood Manor fire 7 years ago." Sarah's blood turned to ice. No one had spoken that name, Ashwood Manor, in years. It was as if the very mention of her family home was forbidden, too painful or too dangerous to acknowledge. Martha stepped protectively in front of the staircase where Sarah stood hidden in the shadows. "I'm afraid you have the wrong house, sir. Perhaps you should try the inn in town." The stranger's gaze moved past Martha, searching until it found Sarah in the darkness. When their eyes met, something electric passed between them, a recognition that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with destiny. "I don't think I have the wrong house at all," he said softly, never breaking eye contact with Sarah. "My name is Adrian Blackthorne, and I've been searching for you for a very long time." Sarah felt her knees weaken as Adrian Blackthorne stepped into their modest cottage, his presence immediately transforming the homey space into something charged with danger. Martha backed against the wall, her healer's instincts clearly screaming warnings, but she stood her ground protectively. "You need to leave," Martha said firmly. "We want no trouble here." Adrian's storm-gray eyes remained fixed on Sarah, who clutched the banister behind her. "I mean no harm to either of you, but I'm afraid leaving isn't possible until I've spoken with Miss Ashwood." The use of her family name sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. She hadn't heard it spoken aloud since the funeral, a closed casket affair where she'd stood veiled and silent while the town mourned her parents and younger brother. "How do you know that name?" Sarah whispered, finally finding her voice. Adrian moved with fluid grace to the center of the small living room, his coat flowing around him like liquid shadow. "Because I knew your family, Sarah. I knew them well." Martha gasped. "That's impossible. Sarah was just a child when they died." "Yes." Adrian's expression grew somber. "Your father, Lord Edmund Ashwood, was one of the few humans who knew what I truly was. He and I had an arrangement." Understanding began to dawn on Sarah, pieces of childhood memories she'd tried to forget suddenly clicking into place. The late-night visitors her father would meet with in his study, the books she wasn't allowed to read, the strange symbols carved into the stone archway of their manor's entrance. "What are you?" she asked, though somewhere deep in her soul she already knew. Adrian's lips curved in a humorless smile, revealing the barest hint of fangs. "I think you know, Sarah. Your father certainly did." "Vampire," Martha breathed, reaching for the iron cross that hung around her neck. "Adrian Blackthorne, Lord of the Northern Territories, Alpha of the Shadowmere Coven," he said formally, inclining his head. "Your father served as my liaison with the human world. He helped maintain the balance between our species." Sarah's mind reeled. Her scholarly father, with his gentle hands and kind eyes, had been involved with vampires. "That's impossible. My father was a good man." "The best of men," Adrian agreed, "which is why his death was such a tragedy, and why his murder required justice." The word murder hung in the air like a physical blow. Sarah had always known the fire was no accident, but to hear it confirmed so bluntly left her struggling to breathe. "The fire wasn't random," she said. "It wasn't a question. Your family was targeted by a faction that opposed the peace your father helped maintain. They called themselves the Purification Order, humans who believed our kind should be eliminated entirely." Adrian's voice grew cold. "Dangerous, and they killed your parents and brother first, then set the fire to make it look like an accident." Sarah touched her scarred cheek through the veil. "And I was supposed to die too." "Yes, but you survived, hidden away in that cottage, protected by Martha's herbs and isolation." His eyes softened slightly. "I've been searching for you ever since, trying to find the one person who could help me bring your family's killers to justice." Martha stepped forward angrily. "You want to use her? She's been through enough." "I want to offer her a choice," Adrian corrected. "The Purification Order still exists, Sarah. They're still hunting down anyone connected to the old alliances. You're not safe here anymore." "What do you mean?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Adrian pulled a folded paper from his coat and held it out to her. With trembling fingers, she took it and unfolded what appeared to be a wanted poster. Her own face stared back at her, an artist's rendering based on her appearance before the fire, with the words "Ashwood Heir, Reward for Capture" printed boldly beneath. "They know you're alive," Adrian said gently, "and they're coming." Outside, as if summoned by his words, the sound of multiple horses approaching carried through the night air, growing closer with each passing second. The thundering of hoofbeats grew closer, and through the cottage windows Sarah could see torches flickering between the trees. Martha immediately began dousing the oil lamps, plunging them into darkness. "How many?" Adrian asked, his voice taking on a lethal edge that sent ice through Sarah's veins. "At least 6 riders," Martha whispered, peering through a crack in the shutters. "They're surrounding the cottage." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as the reality of her situation crashed over her. After 7 years of hiding, 7 years of safety in this small cottage, her past had finally caught up with her. She thought of the life she'd built here. Quiet, isolated, but peaceful. Was she ready to give that up? "Sarah Ashwood," a harsh voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. Come out and we'll make this quick." Adrian moved to stand beside her in the shadows, his presence both terrifying and oddly comforting. "You have a choice," he said quietly. "Come with me, and I'll teach you to fight back, to reclaim your family's legacy, or stay and let them finish what they started 7 years ago." "Some choice," Martha muttered, but her weathered hand found Sarah's and squeezed gently. Through the window they could see the riders dismounting, men in dark cloaks with silver symbols stitched onto their chests. The same symbol Sarah now remembered seeing the night of the fire, burned into her memory along with everything else. "There's something else you should know," Adrian said, his storm-gray eyes finding hers in the darkness. "The scars on your face, they're not just from the fire." Sarah's hand flew to her veil. "What do you mean?" "The beam that fell on you was carved with purification runes, dark magic meant to mark you, to make you easy to track." His voice was gentle but firm. "That's why you've felt different all these years, why you've been drawn to the forest, to the darkness. The magic in those scars connects you to our world, whether you choose it or not." The revelation hit her like a physical blow. All these years she'd thought her fascination with the supernatural, her strange dreams, her ability to sense things others couldn't, were just products of her trauma. But they were something else entirely. "You're saying I'm already connected to your world?" "The magic in your blood awakened the night you nearly died. You're not fully human anymore, Sarah. You're something in between, which makes you incredibly powerful and incredibly dangerous to people like them." He nodded toward the window where shadows moved closer to the cottage. A flaming arrow suddenly crashed through the shutters, landing on Martha's herb table and immediately setting the dried plants ablaze. The message was clear. They weren't planning to take prisoners. "The back window," Martha said urgently, grabbing a bag she kept packed for emergencies. "I can get you to the forest path." But Adrian shook his head. "They'll have that covered too. There's only one way out." He turned to Sarah, and in his ancient eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to find there. Genuine care, not pity or disgust at her scars, but actual concern for her well-being. "Trust me," he said, extending his hand. "Let me show you what you really are." Another arrow hit the cottage, and the fire began to spread. The smell of smoke brought back memories so vivid that Sarah nearly collapsed. Her mother's screams, her brother's cries, the sound of her father fighting the intruders before the flames consumed everything. She looked at Adrian's outstretched hand, then at Martha, who gave her a sad but encouraging nod. "Go, child, you were never meant for hiding." Taking a deep breath that tasted of smoke and destiny, Sarah pulled off her veil and let it fall to the floor. For the first time in 7 years, her scarred face was completely uncovered, the silver lines catching the firelight like war paint. She took Adrian's hand. The moment their skin touched, power coursed through her veins like lightning. Her scars began to glow with an ethereal light, and suddenly she understood. She wasn't broken. She was forged. Now, Adrian said, his fangs fully extended, his eyes blazing with supernatural fire, let's remind them why they should fear the Ashwood name. The power that surged through Sarah when she touched Adrian's hand was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. It started as a warm tingling in her fingertips, but quickly spread through her entire body, making her scars pulse with silver light. The cottage around them seemed to fade, replaced by a heightened awareness of every sound, every scent, every heartbeat within 100 yards. "What's happening to me?" she gasped, her voice carrying a new resonance that made the very air vibrate. "Your true nature is awakening," Adrian replied, his grip on her hand steady and sure. "The magic that marked you 7 years ago is finally responding to its counterpart." Through the burning cottage walls, Sarah could suddenly see the Purification Order members with crystal clarity. 6 men, all armed with silver weapons and bottles of what she instinctively knew was holy water. Their leader, a scarred man with dead eyes, held a crossbow loaded with what appeared to be a wooden stake. "Thomas Blackwood," Adrian growled, recognizing the leader. "I should have killed him years ago. You know him? He's the one who ordered your family's execution." Adrian's voice carried centuries of controlled rage. "He believes he's on a holy mission to cleanse the world of supernatural influence." The cottage shuddered as more flaming arrows found their mark. Martha pressed a small cloth bag into Sarah's hand. "Protective herbs," she explained quickly, "your grandmother's recipe. It'll help shield your mind from their binding spells." Sarah clutched the bag, feeling its warmth merge with the power flowing through her veins. "Martha, come with us." The older woman shook her head sadly. "This is your path, child. I'm too old to walk it with you, but remember, you are not defined by your scars. You are defined by what you choose to do with the strength they gave you." Another crash, and part of the cottage roof caved in, sending burning debris raining down around them. They were out of time. Adrian's eyes met Sarah's, and she saw a question there, a silent asking of permission for what he was about to do. Somehow, she understood. He was offering her a choice that would change everything. She nodded. Adrian pulled her close, and suddenly they were moving faster than humanly possible. The cottage walls became a blur as he carried her through a window that shouldn't have been large enough for 2 people to pass through. They landed in the forest beyond, her feet touching ground just as the cottage exploded in flames behind them. "Impressive," called Thomas Blackwood's voice from the clearing ahead. "But you can't run forever, Ashwood girl. We've been hunting your kind for generations." Sarah stepped out of Adrian's protective embrace, her scars now glowing bright enough to illuminate the dark forest around them. The 6 hunters formed a semicircle, trapping them against the burning remains of the cottage. "My kind?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying a power that made several of the men step back. "And what kind is that?" "Abomination," Thomas spat. "Human soul corrupted by dark magic. Demon spawn wearing an angel's face." For 7 years, Sarah had believed those words, had seen herself as broken, damaged, less than human, but standing here with supernatural power coursing through her veins and Adrian's strength at her back, she finally understood the truth. "You're wrong," she said, pulling the silver light from her scars and letting it flow around her like armor. "I'm not corrupted, I'm evolved." The hunters raised their weapons, but Sarah was faster. The power that had been building inside her for 7 years finally found its release. Silver fire erupted from her hands, creating a barrier between them and their attackers. The holy water the men threw hissed and evaporated before it could touch her skin. "Impossible," Thomas breathed. "The purification mark should have made you weak, controllable." Adrian laughed, a sound like winter wind through dead leaves. "You never understood the magic you were playing with. Those marks didn't purify her, they awakened her. You created the very thing you sought to destroy." Sarah felt her power growing stronger, fed by years of suppressed anger and newfound purpose. She was no longer the frightened girl hiding behind a veil. She was something new, something dangerous, something beautiful. The silver fire dancing around Sarah's hands cast eerie shadows across the forest clearing, illuminating the fear in the hunter's eyes. For 7 years, these men had hunted her like an animal, but now she stood before them transformed, no longer prey, but predator. "You want to know what I really am?" Sarah asked, her voice echoing with otherworldly power. "Let me show you." She raised her hands, and the scars on her face blazed brighter, revealing intricate patterns that had been hidden beneath what everyone assumed was simple burn damage. The marks weren't random. They formed ancient symbols, a language written in pain and magic that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Thomas Blackwood's face went pale. "The prophecy of the Marked One," he whispered. It was real. Adrian moved to stand beside Sarah, his own supernatural aura complementing hers. "Did you really think you could play with forces you didn't understand? The magic you used to mark her didn't make her weak. It made her the bridge between our worlds." "What prophecy?" Sarah demanded, turning to face the hunter who had destroyed her family. Thomas laughed bitterly. "Your parents never told you, did they, about what you were destined to become?" He gestured at her glowing scars. "Those marks aren't a curse, girl. They're a crown. You're the Marked One, the child prophesied to unite the supernatural and human worlds." The revelation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her parents had known. They had known what she would become, and they had hidden it from her, tried to give her a normal childhood, even as they prepared for the inevitable. "That's why they had to die," Thomas continued, his voice filled with fanatic fervor. "Your father's alliance with the vampires was just the beginning. He was preparing the way for you to take power, to create a world where humans bow to monsters." "You're wrong," Sarah said, but doubt crept into her voice. Had her parents been planning to use her supernatural abilities to change the world? Had their love for her been genuine, or had she always been just a tool in some greater plan? Adrian sensed her uncertainty and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your father loved you, Sarah. Whatever prophecy these fanatics believe in, whatever destiny they think awaits you, that doesn't change the fact that Edmund Ashwood died protecting his daughter, not some magical weapon." But Thomas wasn't finished. "Look at her," he shouted to his men. "Look at the power she wields. In 10 years, maybe 20, she'll be strong enough to command armies of the undead. She'll turn every human city into a supernatural stronghold. Is that the world you want for your children?" Sarah felt the weight of his words settling on her shoulders like a mantle she'd never asked to wear. Was this her destiny? To become some kind of supernatural empress? The power flowing through her veins certainly felt limitless, and she could sense other magical beings throughout the forest, all drawn to the energy she was radiating. "The choice is yours, Sarah," Adrian said quietly. "Power doesn't dictate purpose. What you become depends on what you choose to do with what you are." Looking at the hunters surrounding them, Sarah saw fear but also desperation. These weren't evil men. They were terrified humans who believed they were fighting for their species' survival, the same way her parents had believed they were working toward peace between supernatural and human communities. "I choose," Sarah said finally, her voice carrying across the clearing, "to be neither your weapon nor your destroyer." She lowered her hands, pulling the silver fire back into herself. The glow from her scars dimmed to a soft luminescence that was beautiful rather than terrifying. "I choose to be exactly what I've always been," she continued, looking directly at Thomas Blackwood, "a girl who lost her family to fear and hatred, who survived because someone taught her that love is stronger than magic, stronger than prophecy, stronger than the darkness that men do in the name of righteousness." The hunters exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't the monster they'd expected to find. "You killed innocent people," Sarah said, her power now controlled but unmistakably present. "You destroyed my family, my childhood, my sense of safety in the world. But I won't become like you. I won't let hate define what I do with this power. The forest fell silent except for the crackling of the burning cottage behind them. Thomas Blackwood and his hunters stood frozen, clearly unprepared for Sarah's response. They had come expecting to face either a helpless victim or a raging monster, not a young woman who looked at them with pity rather than hatred. "What are you saying?" Thomas demanded, his crossbow still trained on her heart. "I'm saying your war ends here," Sarah replied, her scarred face serene in the silver light emanating from her skin. "You've spent so many years fighting monsters that you became one yourself. I won't continue that cycle." She stepped forward and several hunters raised their weapons nervously, but Sarah's power had shifted, no longer the aggressive force of moments before. Now it felt protective, healing like sunlight after a storm. "Put down your weapons," she said gently. "Go home to your families, live your lives in peace, and let others do the same." "And if we refuse?" Thomas snarled, though his voice lacked its earlier conviction. Adrian moved slightly, his predatory grace making his intentions clear without words. "Then you'll deal with me," he said simply, "and I won't be as merciful as she is." For a long moment, the standoff continued. Then, one by one, the hunters began lowering their weapons. They were outnumbered, outmatched, and facing something they'd never encountered before. A supernatural being who offered forgiveness instead of vengeance. Thomas was the last to lower his crossbow, his face twisted with confusion and defeat. "This isn't over," he said, but the words rang hollow. "Yes," Sarah said sadly, "it is. Your children deserve to grow up in a world without this fear, this hatred. Give them that gift." As the hunters melted back into the forest, Sarah felt the supernatural energy around her beginning to settle. The crisis was over, but her transformation was permanent. She would never again be the hidden girl in the cottage. Adrian approached her carefully, his storm-gray eyes filled with something she'd never seen there before. Not just respect or alliance, but genuine admiration. "That was extraordinary," he said. "In 500 years, I've never seen anyone choose mercy over justice so completely." Sarah touched her scars, no longer hiding them behind a veil. The marks had stopped glowing, but they remained visible, silver lines that caught the moonlight like jewelry. "You said I was beautiful," she murmured, remembering his words from that first night. "Even with these." "Especially with those," Adrian corrected, reaching out to trace one of the lines with a feather-light touch. "They're proof of your strength, your survival, your capacity to transform pain into power and then choose love over revenge. How could that be anything but beautiful?" For the first time in 7 years, Sarah looked at her reflection, not in a mirror, but in Adrian's eyes. And what she saw there wasn't a monster or a weapon or a broken girl. She saw herself, whole and powerful and worthy of love. "What happens now?" she asked. Adrian smiled, and she realized it was the first time she'd seen him look truly happy. "Now we build something new, not the world your father envisioned, not the world Thomas feared, but something better, a place where supernatural beings and humans can coexist without fear or hatred. Together? If you'll have me," he said, and in those ancient eyes she saw vulnerability, hope, and a love that transcended species and time. Sarah took his hand, feeling the familiar tingle of power where their skin touched. But this time, it felt like coming home rather than awakening to war. As they walked away from the ruins of her old life, Sarah realized that her scars had never been marks of damage. They were marks of transformation, proof that even the most devastating experiences could forge something beautiful. Behind them, the cottage continued to burn, taking with it the last remnants of the frightened girl who had hidden from the world. Ahead lay uncertainty, adventure, and the promise of a love story that would span centuries. And if you want to see more stories of supernatural romance and unlikely heroes finding their power, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit that notification bell. Leave a comment below telling us what kind of story you'd like to hear next. And don't forget to share this video with anyone who believes that true beauty comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. Until next time, remember, your scars don't define your limits, they define your strength.